Welcome to the Political Trenches, Local Government at Work. We are honored today to welcome to the show Cathie O'Toole, the CAO for the Halifax Regional Municipality. After a remarkable 25-year career in municipal administration, O'Toole announced earlier this spring that after a successful career in administration, she would be hanging up her hat and moving into another field as the Vice President, Finance and Administration at Dalhousie University. Cathie, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Chris.
So, to kick my line of questions off, Cathie, what's your elevator pitch to people asking what is the role of a CAO?
The role of a CAO is like being an air traffic controller at a very busy airport where you never know what airplane is incoming on any given day, what is going to happen on the ground, and how your crews are going to have to respond.
Wow, that's quite intense. You, of course, probably have the busiest airspace in all of Nova Scotia, I guess, to continue that metaphor. Halifax Regional Municipality, or HRM, has about half the population of Nova Scotia within it. How does a CAO in that role align maybe with CAOs in both Nova Scotia, the rest of Nova Scotia, or maybe beyond? How similar are things? How different are things?
So that's a really great question. And I had a conversation with somebody just earlier today about this topic because I hate to see when CAOs or senior leaders in large municipalities are dismissive of what they can learn from smaller municipal units. And I think I had the benefit of starting my career actually with the provincial government and doing some work with housing and municipal affairs and interacting a lot with smaller municipalities all around the province of Nova Scotia. And it gave me an appreciation that although the scale is larger and there are some unique characteristics to being urban versus a smaller or more mixed municipality, the programs and services delivered and the challenges you face are really similar. And there are things that the larger municipal units can learn from the smaller municipal units and vice versa.
Do you have a couple of examples of things like that where you do see either overlap, not necessarily overlap, but consistency or differences?
Yeah, so in terms of differences, um, the Halifax Regional Municipality, as well as a few of the other, larger to medium-sized municipalities in Nova Scotia that have more urban centers, certainly struggle with homelessness, certainly struggle with crime or drugs or mental health impact on residents, I think, and addictions than a little different way than some of the smaller municipal units that are primarily rural and less populated.
Hmm.
That would be a difference.
I'm sure it would. Were you CAO during the formation of HRM?
No, I've been in municipal government for 25 years, but I've only been CAO for 3 years. Prior to that, I was the CEO and general manager of the municipal water utility, Halifax Regional Water Commission. It's a water, wastewater, and stormwater utility. And then prior to that, I was the CFO for HRM and the Director of Infrastructure and Asset Management. So I was on the executive leadership team at the municipality for about 10 years and went through a number of different positions. So 10 years pure municipal, 10 years over at the water utility, and the rest has been here again. So
Fascinating. I assume then you also work on a national scale as well with things like the Big City Caucus and perhaps with you and your colleagues across the country. Do you notice issues that are similar affecting HRM that may other provincial capitals or other Canadian big cities?
yes, for sure. So we do participate both our elected officials, our mayor participates in the Big City Mayors Initiative, and I participate in a Big City CEOs initiative, basically through the Canadian Urban Institute. It's called BICEP. So the CAOs of Vancouver, Ottawa, Toronto, Edmonton, Calgary, and Halifax are there. Some others pop in from time to time. We would be probably the smallest out of that big city group, but yeah, we meet and we talk about issues. We have common issues often, and have found that convening through that group allows us to more effectively develop common messages or priorities that we can work on with the federal level of government if we're looking at, bilateral type initiatives, or common approaches that we can learn what is successful to go back and share with our respective provincial government based on what's going on in another jurisdiction. The files we talk about the most seem to be housing, public transit, homelessness,
Mhm.
and mental health.
Wow, good. I heard a colleague, a former, and a current CAO say that his job was, and I quote, to provide fearless advice and loyal implementation of what council had said in their direction to council. What's your take on that statement, about the accuracy of that statement?
Yes, I think that's an excellent way to describe it, fearless advice and loyal implementation. I think the most important, characteristic of a good CAO is being non-political, being objective, and not being afraid to give council the advice they need to receive, even when you know that it's, advice that's not going to be well received.
In your tenure, both as working for HR in a variety of capacities, how do you gain the trust of a council? Early in your tenure, early in their tenure?
Well, I think always trying to use evidence-based decision making, linking things back to facts, and that takes some of the personality out of it. Always making it clear that you're giving them this information, ultimately it's their decision. You'll support and implement whatever council decides, but you want them to have the benefit of full and accurate information, or the best information you can provide, in order for them to make the best decision they can for our residents.
Great, thank you. You have probably worked with quite a few elected officials of one sort or another over the time you have either sat in the chair you're in right now, or other similar chairs as well. If you were to think back to the relationship between elected officials and appointed officials, what do you think is maybe the most important one or two things that maybe a new elected official needs to know? Or maybe that a returning elected official needs to be reminded of from time to time?
I think that the most important thing that elected officials need to be reminded of is that, new ones in particular, is that the public service is meant to be non-political, independent, and objective. We're there to serve the whole, not there to serve an individual also. And that our job is to take, you know, also a long-term view and make sure that there's continuity between council to council, and also make sure that, you know, if there are issues, strategic issues, council's trying to decide on, where, sometimes they're putting on the lens of the electoral cycle. We always have to make sure that they also have the longer term view that's beyond the electoral cycle, and try to keep them focused on that. We also have to try to make sure that they're focused also on regional implications, not just the implications for their district.
I'm just going to jump in here, if you don't mind, for a second, Cathie, because you bring up a question that I've been pondering to myself. As Alberta, Quebec, and even Newfoundland and Labrador are all heading to elections in the next few weeks, few days, by the time this airs and by the time we're recording this. Now, you were a CAO between that transitional period from one mayor to another, when Mayor Mike Savage stepped down and then Mayor Andy Fillmore became the new mayor. What's the advice that you give to fellow CAOs to make sure that transition between one type of leadership, and I'm not saying that Andy and Mike were two different people, two different leadership styles, but they're two different people, so there probably is a little bit of different leadership styles. What's the advice that you would give CAO or even administration? Because we often think that while the CAO is technically the only staff member, administration has to sort of learn what the new leadership style is going to be. So what's your advice to CAOs who are going, what am I going to get myself into? Because this is the type of leadership I'm used to. I don't know what the unknown is after election day.
So I think I have three pieces of advice. One is
Give us all three.
reassurance, flexibility, and a good contract. So the reassurance piece, I think it's really important to make sure immediately the new mayor or new councillors know and understand that you're there to support them, and you have to be viewed as not being too aligned or embedded or, you know, stuck on whatever was done by the previous mayor and council, and that you're open to change. So that's to the flexibility piece. So the first one is reassurance that you're not political, and you're there to support them. Tell us what you want done or tell us what's important to you. The second thing is the flexibility piece, because you're going to have to be flexible and recognize that if there's a significant change in mayor and council, and sometimes just changing one or two doesn't make a big difference, even if it's the mayor. But if there's a whole scale change like we had in the last election with the new mayor and half of council changing, then you've got to expect that that's going to cause some changes. And it's okay. You have to reassure your organization that, you know, strategic decisions that might have been taken by council in the past or strategic policies, it's okay if this new mayor and council wants to review them. That's what they're elected to do. And we'll, you know, roll with whatever comes out of that. But the third piece of advice around the contract, I think any CAO today, in today's environment, because of the difficulty of the job and because of the uncertainty around legislative changes like strong mayor powers in different provinces, and the uncertainty that elections bring, if you haven't already negotiated your contract, make sure you've got some good, you know, exit provisions in there, because the average tenure of a CAO is not very long these days. I saw a report that was just released out west. I don't know, I think it might have been in Alberta, that was saying the average tenure of a CAO right now for the larger municipalities is 2.8 years.
Wow. I've seen similar numbers, and I know Ontario, I think Strategy Corp puts out a CAO survey regularly, if not every year, and it is quite alarming to see that. So that also tells me that there are some long-term CAOs who've been with municipalities for a long time, which tells me at the other end, there are some who aren't there very long at all, and if because of the average being less than 3, as you suggest. So we hear quite a lot from coast to coast about security for CAOs and why the cost of CAOs is rising so quickly. A lot of it's based on what you have just said there too. So it makes a lot of sense. Thanks. The next question I have about you is you, the CAO, is kind of at the pinch point in the hourglass. You've got one foot in the governance world and you've got one foot in the management administration service delivery world. We talked about gaining the trust of a new council. How do you keep the trust of municipal administration as well?
I think that municipal administration needs to know that the CAO has their back. So I try to be really as connected as I can with the grassroots of the organization. So when I say CAO has their back, the CAO needs to care about employees. The CAO needs to have the back of the executive leadership team. But the CAO also needs to have a pulse on what's going on at different levels in the organization, at the grassroots level in particular, because unfortunately information gets filtered as it gets up to the CAO. And it's only natural, you know, if I go and talk to one of my direct reports, you know, how's this initiative going? They're going to say, oh, it's fine. Sorry, I had a dog barking there. You may have to edit that out.
uh, it wouldn't. I don't know if you were finished there or not, Cathie, but
I do have one thing to add, if
yeah,
you don't
please do.
mind.
Go for it. I just
So
cut in and cut out. Go for it.
So one of the things, I do for the grassroots connection is on a quarterly basis, I'm meeting with all of our union presidents. That's something I started when I became CAO, and it has been very helpful and it has gone over well with our various unions. And it's helped us move the needle on some stuff that crosses every business unit and every service. So things like respectful workplace, things like employee engagement. I introduced a whistleblower hotline for the organization, and the unions were really useful and pivotal to help, figure out how to set that up, but also to promote it and to encourage their members to use it.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you. Yeah, when we work with local governments and local administrations, we find things like role clarity to be one of the biggest topics that come up either from administrators or from elected officials as well. How have you had any challenges around keeping role clarity front and center between staff, council, and the rest of it? And how do you, if those have been present, how do you manage that?
I would say there's three areas where I've had some challenges around role clarity. The first is around emergency management. We had some significant events in 2003, a really bad wildfire, a couple of really bad floods, and just the role clarity around the whole incident command structure, the role of the agency administrator versus the elected officials versus the incident commander, particularly when it's a jointly managed incident between the municipality and the province. So thankfully, as a result of those incidents, we and other municipal units have been working really closely with the province and have done a lot of great work. So I think we're in a good place there. The other role clarity issue is regarding police chiefs. Policing is complicated because of the independence of the police chief, but administratively, the police chief reports through to me. And we have a board of police commissioners who has the oversight for policing. So the role clarity around that, you need to have really good governance for the boards of police commissioners. And I guess the third role clarity challenge I had was just with the transition from the outgoing mayor and council to the new mayor and council. It's a fairly big learning curve, especially if you're someone who's newly elected for the first time, to understand, what is my power or authority as a counselor versus a mayor versus a CAO, and how do we all work together?
Do you have any advice for other CAOs? I mentioned we see this quite a lot. I mean, how do you actually maintain that focus on role clarity? How do you challenge a council or a council member who may not kind of be on the same page in terms of what they think their job is versus what the legislation and history would say that it really is?
Well, legislation is often just one tool. I think you also need a really good administrative order or bylaw that sets out more detail around how the council is supposed to operate on a day-to-day basis. I think that helps with role clarity and always drawing the councillors and the mayor back to the legislation, the legislated role, and whatever's in your administrative bylaw.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Thank you. My last question for you is just around learning and professional development for a CAO. In our last interview, we spoke with a brand new CAO. We're now talking with you now with somebody who's got a lot of experience. How have you stayed current in the role of the CAO, training, learning, professional development, and how do you model that for other people?
So I've been a lifelong learner, and on the governance side, I decided a few years ago that I wanted to go take governance training, and I did my Institute of Corporate Directors designation. But one other thing I did after I became CAO is I did take the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators program that they've got for new or aspiring CAOs. And, I questioned, I've been in municipal government a long time. Am I going to get a lot out of this? And who's going to be there? What other municipal units and how much will they have in common with us? But I did get quite a lot out of it. All of the instructors were great and experienced CAOs, and it was a good learning opportunity for me.
Okay. You mentioned the ICD designation, and I hear that from time to time as a way of kind of learning about governance. It's more of a corporate model than a pure government type governance model. How well does the ICD translate into the work that you do?
I think it translates more for some of the agencies, boards, and commissions that roll up to the municipality. So less so for council as a whole and the corporate organization as a whole, but we've certainly got some organizations, for instance, our Water Commission, which is a government business enterprise, that what you need to know from a governance perspective to run a private sector board versus a not-for-profit board versus a government business enterprise isn't all that different. And sometimes you need to be able to speak that common language, certainly to be able to command the respect of some of the members of the public who step forward and volunteer to serve on some of those boards.
Thanks. Thank you.
I'm going to jump in with some questions, but I want to just quickly go back to a question that Ian was talking about the role clarity. I thought this was a perfect time to shamelessly plug his book, Who's Driving the Grader, for anyone who is out there wanting to listen and wanting to read a great book about the roles and responsibilities of CAO and council. Go pick up Ian's book, Who's Driving the Grader. It's a great resource for any new council member. Come on, Ian, shameless
Chris,
plug
way to
time.
go.
But back to Cathie. Now, you're into the role of CAO for just over 2.5 years, almost 3 years now. How has the role changed, or your understanding of the role of a CAO changed from day one to where we are today?
So there's been a couple significant changes. In Nova Scotia, there was a legislative change last fall, which imposed a quasi-judicial function on CAOs in Nova Scotia. So it's the ability to basically remove or amend private restrictive covenants on private property. In the past, if I have a property in a subdivision and everybody in the subdivision, bought their lots, built their house at the same time, there might be restrictive covenants on the properties. Now, in the interest of furthering densification and development of housing, the provincial government is trying to make it easier for people to deal with restrictive covenants that might prevent increasing density or increasing height. So we have that authority now, and that's not something that I had ever asked for, or any CAO in Nova Scotia had ever asked for. We've started to process the first few requests to deal with restrictive covenants, and unfortunately, it doesn't matter what your decision is, somebody's going to be aggrieved, and there's going to be an appeal, and it's not a fun process.
You don't say. But let's talk about the public for a second, because while the mayor's the face of council, you of CAO is the face of administration. How does the role of CAO, and how have you looked at the role of CAO in engagement and engagement with the general public of Halifax Regional Municipality? Because I can imagine your job is a lot to do with administration and council, but there's a portion of your job that has to be dedicated to what the residents want. So how do you face that portion of your job?
So I engage with residents, through, if we're doing a public hearing process, I certainly would have some engagement with residents. Public meetings from time to time that the municipality would be organizing, I would be going to them. I go to a lot of meetings if there's a contentious issue on the agenda, like some of the committees of council or the Board of Police Commissioners, even though I'm not a member of the Board of Police Commissioners. So I would be, of course, having to pick and choose based on what is the hot button topic of the day, where I need to appear. And in terms of, that other means of engaging publicly and being the face of the municipality, I think it depends on the reporting relationship with mayor and council and what mayor and council wants you to do. Some mayors and councils like their CAO to be very, you be front facing, you be the spokesman for the municipality. Others prefer that it's the mayor or speaking on behalf of mayor and council or a designated, corporate communications type spokesman. I've had experience over the years with different perspectives from elected officials on that, and my position on it's always been, I'll go where you want me to go and do what you want me to do. So, but there are certain times, like for instance, during an emergency management or a state of emergency, where I think it's appropriate, the CAO has to step to the microphone and make sure that the information that's getting out is timely, is accurate, and is useful to people.
Everything I've ever done in my life, I've always changed. I've always grown. I've always learned something about myself in a role that I've taken on. Now, as we come to the end of your tenure as CAO, what has Cathie learned about herself in this position that makes you a better person as you leave and go into your next profession?
Well, I think I have learned that I can now let go. I didn't think I would ever be able to let go of municipal government. And I didn't think that necessarily I'd be leaving as early as I am. I had intended to work a little bit longer, but I have a great team. The timing seems right. And I'm realizing that the world doesn't end with municipal government. There are these skills are transferable in so many ways. So
I
I think
feel
that's a good
attacked,
message.
Cathie. Like
I think
that's my
it's a message of hope.
that's my whole life is municipal government. What are you doing to me? Um, but looking back on your tenure as CAO for Halifax Regional Municipality, you talked about the tip line that you installed. But what's the one thing you were most proud of that you look back and say, you know what? I'm leaving the HRM better off than I got it when I was appointed as CAO. Not saying that it wasn't in a bad shape, but I'm just saying we always try to leave a little bit of a legacy. What are you hoping your legacy is in your position?
Yeah, I think every CAO, has their causes and moves the needle in different ways. I would see there's two or three ways that I've moved the needle. I know our employee engagement scores are better. The
Mm.
employee morale is better now than when I came, and that took a fair amount of effort. I know that thanks to the introduction of the whistleblower hotline and some work we were doing around respectful workplace, that human rights complaints, respectful workplace complaints are down, which is a good thing. I know that we have significantly improved the public safety side of the house. I think my legacy is probably on the public safety side of the house. And I think it's because, that first year as CIO, it was immediately into emergency management. And I had come from a operational, organization delivering water, wastewater, and stormwater. So that was an area of focus for me. And I put in place a structure with a commissioner of public safety, with our fire chief, our police chief administratively, our chief superintendent of the Halifax Regional RCMP group. So we have contracted our CMP policing as well as our own municipal police force, and also our executive director of community safety. So all of those organizations that are really key to delivery of public safety are now under the oversight of one commissioner. And it's identifying a lot of opportunities to operate more seamlessly, to share resources, which is always cost effective for taxpayers, and to also innovate and look at service delivery differently. So, for instance, there are some tasks now where we're trying not to have our sworn police officers responding to that call. We're trying to have, other civilian employees like by law enforcement, or maybe a mobile mental health team responding instead of the police officer.
There's been a rise in more and more municipalities not having CAOs, SAOs, city clerks, because the role is not as desirable as it once was. 10, 15 years ago, it was a thing that you can get into. But as we talked in the beginning of the interview, 2.8 years is not a career that someone can pick up and move their life for. What is your thoughts on the future of the CAO industry? And I say industry as in the leadership industry in municipalities as you get you ready to leave yourself and start your next career chapter.
I think it's definitely different now, Chris, as you've identified, and I think it is in a bit of a downward spiral. I think that most people aspiring to be CAOs now, particularly in larger municipal units, recognize that it's something you're probably only going to do for 3 to 5 years, and you wait and do it, when you're nearing retirement. But I do think that there is going to be a rebound and a recognition of the necessity of the role of the CAO and the importance of the role of the CAO, particularly in the provinces where they do move away from CAOs, maybe into the strong mayor model. I think there's going to be, I won't say balls get dropped, but I think there's probably a real underestimation of what goes into the CAO role. And I think after a few years, there's going to be a rebound, and it will become a profession, or a profession that's more respected perhaps than it is right now. It's been interesting because, strong mayor powers is something that's been swirling around in the media here in Nova Scotia for months. And I try not to read a lot of social media comments, but this is one area where I can't really ignore it. So I go in and I read the comments. And it's amazing the amount of citizens who have no idea what a CAO is or what a CAO does. If I go to a public meeting and speak at a public meeting, I will often start by saying, okay, does anybody here know what a CAO is? What does the CAO of HRM actually do? And have a discussion. And it's always really, really entertaining.
So can I just pick up on that for 1 second? Because I wanted to ask this question, but I didn't know how to fit this in. What is the biggest misconception that you hear from the public about what the CAO actually is and does? Because I can imagine that is that for me, for Ian, we are an education podcast. We are an education show where we try to educate people about what the local governments are doing. From your perspective, what is the biggest misconception that you just irk over every time you hear it?
Well, it's funny. I hear two misconceptions, and they're kind of at the opposite ends of the spectrum. The one that I hear that irks me the most is the CAO is some shadowy, dark, sneaky, powerful figure who is really behind the scenes running the entire municipality. And, really, CAOs don't do anything without direction from mayor and council. So, for instance, in Halifax this year, we purchased a armored rescue vehicle. That was in the media. Anyways, that got spun that the CAO had gone off and purchased this tank for police, without proper authorization. It was in the municipal budget that was approved by regional council. It was purchased in accordance with a procurement policy approved by regional council with a lot of transparency. So that would be one example. But anyways, the CAO is the all-powerful, shadowy, sneaky figure. That's one that irks me. The other one is the CAO is just like a clerk. Oh, that's just the administrative person. She's like, I don't know, a secretary for council or something.
I can imagine that's going to deter a lot of people from getting into the role, those two complete polar opposites. But I am cautious of time, and I know Ian and I have taken more time than we probably expected. So I have one last question for you before we let you go, Cathie. Now that you are hanging up your hat, how do you hope your time in office will be remembered as you head off to Dalhousie University?
I hope that I will be remembered as somebody who was competent and who had a lot of integrity. That would be my hope.
Well, from our about half hour, 35-minute conversation, I feel like that should be the way that people remember you because I've learned so much. But from Ian and myself, thank you so much from the bottom of our heart for taking time out of your day to do this interview, and good luck in your next chapter.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much. And I'm going to run out and get Ian's book, I think, so I can read it.